it just won't go away. It simply will not go away. Max Verstappen and Mercedes. It just doesn't know when to quit. But then you hear all the stuff surrounding George Russell as of late, Yuki Tsunoda being punchy, and Christian Horner's outfit under-delivering, relatively speaking, and yeah, okay. There's a little bit more evidence, but it's still not all of the story. Couple that with a major aerodynamic upgrade, which is only being handed to Max's car for the Hungarian Grand Prix. Yeah, so much for Checo having the best machinery to try and get back up the championship field, am I right? You can tell that Red Bull are now beginning to do some heavy lifting in response to McLaren and now Mercedes. According to Dr. Obbs, Red Bull are effectively resorting to not only bringing track-specific wings, but now track-specific engine covers, in this case being related to high-downforce circuits like a Hungaroring. Now, it's all very well and good talking about this upgrade. It might give Max more performance, it may not do anything, given that the last couple of upgrades for Red Bull have only done enough to just keep Max that little bit ahead of the rest of the competition when you put him in that car. But it does really signify something else, that, indeed, Red Bull are looking to more interesting and overt ways in trying to best the competition. The development war between teams is really starting to heat up, especially what happened with Ferrari, who I ultimately think have gotten greedy, which is why they are now floundering trying to find out which spec of their car works. This cover actually looking more like an RB19B rather than the RB20, what with the cannons. So with those not being on Max's car, you could say that Verstappen had those cannons fired! Okay, Law, fine. What's your point? Well, my point is that things are starting to get very interesting when it comes to the rumours regarding Max Verstappen and Mercedes. Now, no, don't worry. I'm not succumbing to the idea of Max going to Mercedes for next year. That is still far too early. There are still many questions surrounding a possible move. Currently, there are no reasons for Max to up sticks and leave as of writing. Red Bull do have the capacity still, the personnel, and the knowledge to cater to Verstappen immediately. And they are more than happy to offer him every opportunity to improve the car. I mean, just take a look at what they're offering Max and not Checo. They are giving him the latest and greatest. And yes, we have seen that with the likes of Norris and McLaren. He usually gets the parts first. But as of late, Red Bull have been giving the upgraded parts to both drivers, usually, so this is a break from tradition. And not to mention, Max Verstappen took up the offer to drive the RB18 around Imola to try and compare what was going on with the curb riding issues, because it wasn't as much of an issue with the RB18 as it is with the RB20, so, you know, Max is getting stuck in as well. Moreover, if this high downforce spec RB20 turns out to be the thing that catapults Max back into the lead convincingly, then all this talk will just die down for a while longer as normal service will resume. But this is still a major risk that Red Bull is undertaking. We might not even see it come the race, we might just see it in FP1 and FP2, and we might not see it on Saturday. It all depends on what's going on, because this is meant to be a high downforce specification. But with it does come a potential sacrifice when it comes to cooling, because there are other avenues that are being sacrificed as well. Notably the air intakes behind the driver's head, which supposedly Adrian Newey was dead set against. Is this possibly a rolling back to perhaps a more Newey-like spec? Because, again, this does look more like an RB19 Max's car than an RB20, what with the Mercedes-like cannons we've seen with the Mercedes car. They are now venturing away from the cannons that they were famous for a year or so ago. There are lots of swings and roundabouts here, compromises, but Red Bull are really pushing the envelope to try and stay ahead. So if these upgrades ultimately don't work as intended and Max has to go to the usual RB20, that could mean Max may start to feel that the team he has built around him is starting to deviate from the model that brought him success with them in the first place and what he's come to expect from them. Not to mention all of the rumours surrounding the fact that Pierre Waché, the main Red Bull designer currently, and Adrian Newey were at loggerheads regarding the direction of the RB20. Adrian Newey, with Max, was considered like second family, one of the major cores of the Red Bull family that Max has grown accustomed to. And Max has said in public that losing Adrian was a heavy loss and it was a blow for him. But it was something that he could weather, and he actually stuck around because supposedly, way back early when it was being mooted, Max was thinking that Adrian not being there would be a condition about him even staying, but that sort of died down as of late. And I don't think this would be something that would cause him to leave Red Bull immediately. You're not suddenly going to have a really, really good car and then suddenly a really, really terrible car whilst the regulations remain the same. But, yeah, maybe give it time. If the car does fail to give Max what he wants in 2025 and he doesn't really figure for the championship, or it's going to be a really close-knit battle where the car letting him down could be the pivotal thing that prevents him from winning the title for a 5th year in a row, then questions will be asked. And we'll get back to a tense and precarious situation that we had before Honda came into Red Bull and the RB15 was showing positive potential and Max was consistently winning more, and the uptick of Red Bull was a reality. 2017 and 18, there were many flying rumours going around from Team Verstappen that if things weren't going the way that they wanted, then there were clauses in Verstappen's contract that could say they could leave for another team that would give him what he wants immediately. And then Toto could have redeemed himself much earlier than is supposedly mooted. Which is why I reckon Max Verstappen will start to watch what Red Bull's rivals are doing with great interest next year, most notably Mercedes' W16. I would have also said that McLaren would be on that list too, but I think Max isn't going anywhere near that team, what with the blowback from Zach Brown in recent weeks, as well as the Dutchman admitting that the lineup of Norris and Piastri there is perfect for them, so you wouldn't want to disrupt that. And besides, Max has publicly said that he wants to maintain the friendship with Lando as best as he can, him reaching out to Lando not long after what happened in Austria. So having Norris and Verstappen in the same car, yeah, good luck with that. All of those rumours about Norris going to Red Bull, after what we've seen, yeah, no. But one of Max's eyes will be kept on Toto's team throughout 2025, I mark you, as Mercedes are lining themselves up to be incredibly competitive from the outset, considering there's no rule changes being lined up for next season, and the W15 is looking like a car which the team can work well with, as can its drivers. Now, I understand, you might be sick and tired of all of these rumours about Max and Mercedes in 2025. I am too, which is why I think that is not going to happen. It's too soon. And it really doesn't help that Toto Wolff is constantly flirting with the idea, just bringing it up every now and again, that it's still on the table. The Mercedes board have given him the permission in which to investigate a potential rumour. They're willing to fork out the money, like they weren't willing to fork out for Lewis. But these talks will just not die down, and even though Helmut Marko's tried to rubbish the speculation regarding the move and says it's just that, speculation, he then goes on to say, almost in the same sentence in his usual roundabout fashion, that Max does have performance clauses of his own, which could activate a move out of the team without penalty and with immediate effect, should he choose to use it. I mean, it's not that far-fetched in of itself, because Red Bull, the team that Max has worked with for nearly a decade at this point, has ruthless policies regarding contracts and driver swaps of their own, so why wouldn't Team Verstappen be just as cutthroat? Which is where we move on to the next phase of this discussion, and we've got to talk about the other Red Bull drivers and how they might spark a move of their own because of what they've been saying to the media. I really wish Yuki said this a couple of days ago. I could have rolled it into my discussion video that I made yesterday about the topic, about how potentially Red Bull could be calling in the young boys to help sort out the Red Bull Junior program, but, you know, we just gotta make do. With speculation running rampant as to who will be partnering Max going forward, whether it's Checo or somebody else, Tsunoda is starting to get very feisty with his musings on the matter, and when asked whether he deserved the opportunity to be Verstappen's teammate for a season, Yuki simply said, yes. Oh, that's quite telling. And I think he's right to be that curt, because there is something fishy going on, and he's also said that if Liam Lawson supposedly were given the plum to race for Red Bull over Tsunoda, who has been with that operation in F1 since 2021, coming up to his 5th season, then he says that that would be weird. Now, you might think, oh, saying weird, that's not really sparking controversy or suspicion. Well, you know, it is kind of suspicious, because we just got to look back to the past, and many Red Bull Juniors did get a chance at the top team. Heck, even Danny Kvyat got a chance at Red Bull, and he wasn't terrible in 2015. He just about held steady next to Daniel Ricciardo. I mean, 2016, though, I mean, you could say that his career definitely torpedoed after that. For Red Bull to overlook Tsunoda after all these years would be a shame, but the rhetoric from the driver is notable in that he is ready to take on Verstappen. And that might be the thing that could be his undoing in getting into that team, because that kind of personality, would Horner really want that in the same car as Max? Somebody who's ready to take him on? Probably not, because Christian Horner quite likes the idea of being successful and fast, and even though the Constructors' Championship is a little bit precarious at the moment, the Drivers' title at least could still be theirs, because Max Verstappen is driving the pants off of that car, even though the RB20 is not as dominant as the RB19 or even the 18. I just get the feeling that Max is sort of aware that the status quo at the top team is about to change, and he's got to try and do something in which to quell speculation. Because even though in the past Max has said, oh, I don't really care who my teammate is, so long as they don't get in my way, that's sort of changed in a way, and all the stuff that's been going on with Checo, Max has not really been saying much, but he has said something now, and his assessment of all the stuff that Checo's been going through as of late has been, well, down to bad luck and circumstances getting in the way. Oh, Checo's been doing everything possible to try and make the most out of the car, and that he's been a solid teammate, and I have no complaints. And yeah, it sort of reminds me of what happened when there was speculation around Valtteri Bottas being replaced at Mercedes with, notably, George, and Lewis would defend Valtteri to the hilt, saying that he was the best teammate that he ever had in Formula One because he didn't get in Lewis's way ultimately, and he was the definition of an F1 wingman. That's incredibly weird. Usually Max is quite dismissive, and now he's not, because he knows that things could easily change. And I'm not talking about just Tsunoda. I'm talking about if these performance clauses of Checo's are activated and they are real, even though Checo says that they're not, and he's determined to stay in that seat, even if he has to bolt himself to it, then Daniel coming in, for this year, potentially in a mid-season driver swap, who knows? This could go one of either two ways. Yes, Daniel isn't the same guy he was back when he was teammates with Max in the first place, but he is just as keen to prove himself. What would we see? A Ricciardo grateful to be back in the top team? Or a Ricciardo actively wanting to shut down his critics and prove that he still got it, using Verstappen as an example? Well, watch this space. Okay, alright, if Ricciardo does get that opportunity and it rocks the boat with Verstappen, and eventually Verstappen finds his situation at Red Bull completely untenable and he goes to Mercedes, well, what's going to happen with George? Toto's absolutely adored George for a decade at this point. Where's the room in him, especially with Antonelli in the waiting? Well, yes, that's absolutely true. The public comments of Toto are a cause for concern because he's not been mincing his words in regards to Kimi Antonelli and Max Verstappen. If George's management are not currently on the blower to teams up and down the grid discussing potential options for their candidate after his contract with Mercedes runs out in 2025, then they're simply not doing their job. Because the reality is that even though George is beginning to rediscover his mojo at Mercedes and coming into the role of the team leader for this year and next, as Lewis is now starting to rediscover himself and maybe holding his own as well, so maybe it might be even equal footing this year, it's still a thing that George has to concern himself with. That, yeah, he might be completely blowing Antonelli out of the park as he learns his route around Formula One if they do decide to rush him in to Formula One next year. But the reality is that if you've got a multiple world champion in the waiting, George, Max, no. One of them is going to go, and it's going to be George. One of my major sentiments regarding driver transfers is that it matters significantly when a team openly says they want you. Being wanted seriously makes all the difference. Which is why I'm still baffled that Carlos Sainz is bucking this trend, or either that, or it's just proving that being wanted can seriously cause you to shut down in terms of your decision making. Because right now, Carlos Sainz is being wanted by multiple teams. He can't make his mind up. And now we've got Toto being more open to Carlos Sainz for 2025, which will just make George's situation all the more complicated. It's gone into overdrive again about who's going to be racing at Mercedes, after months of it not really being that interesting. Which is why this report I'm about to share with you got me inspired for this video. Reports from Motorsport magazine via Planet F1 have supposed the notion that George Russell might become a prime candidate for Audi when it becomes that in 2026, the year after the Brits Mercedes deal runs out. If it becomes evident that Kimi Antonelli is destined for Mercedes and then alongside Max Verstappen for 2026 at the earliest, then there won't be any room for George. So maybe he might need to find a team where he can be the de facto team leader without question. And right now, that's exactly what Audi needs, because one of the things that signified Russell's time at Williams was that he was fighting for every single point possible, or the best result possible that the car could provide him. And that is exactly the kind of hustle that Audi needs. And Mercedes have really not been capitalizing on until recently. Because last year, when Mercedes were floundering and George was on the radio to try and hustle for that extra point using any means necessary, he was mostly shut down by the team, which led to him being frustrated over the radio, which was played out to the world. Which basically instilled the notion in everybody that George was simply a moaner, a whinger, making really weird sound bites and just being irritating to listen to. But maybe that's the kind of mentality that the likes of Sauber need to try and kick on when they become Audi. Because the reality is that Sauber is currently struggling to find a driver who will take the leap and partner the likes of Nico Hülkenberg. Carlos was meant to go there, but has seemingly overlooked it, and the team has given up and tried to publicly woo him. Ocon's been tempted toward the improving Haas team after himself supposedly being blocked from a mid-season transfer to Williams for this year, but all this could play into the advantage of Zhou Guanyu for 2025. You might be thinking that Bottas might get a stay of execution, but I think he's realising that his time at Sauber is limited, and there's potentially an open seat at Williams with James Vowles, and even though they've had their issues in the past, seeing a friendly face there with Mercedes power, that's not something that Valtteri would completely ignore. But Zhou Guanyu getting one more year in Formula 1 to try and prove himself as Audi kick on and the infrastructure of Sauber improves, it could be crucial for his future in Formula 1. That and the money does pay good. Zhou is keen to stay in F1, even as a reserve driver, he said. He might still see the benefits in that. And simply put, 2026 will unleash a couple of big-name F1 drivers, and I think Sauber will really need to seriously look at George, because all of their other ideal candidates, Sainz, Ocon, Gasly, Tsunoda, the ones that were on that list, they're all gone because they're either being sewn up by other teams or they're staying put where they are. Yeah, there's Dragovic, of course, that was on the list, but, if George is available, then, take Russell. But the fact of the matter is that George Russell needs to pay attention about what's going on at Mercedes and their true intentions with Verstappen and Antonelli. Because if they wait too long with Antonelli and don't get that super license sorted out, then some of the big super license points that he acquired a couple of years ago may expire, and then he'll be stuck in a rut. But one point is becoming obvious though. Mercedes are looking like their old selves for the first time in a while. Lewis Hamilton saying that the team had never lost their fighting spirit, and it's showing. The team feels rejuvenated with an energy that feels more compelling than in recent years. If that turns out to be the case, and Lewis Hamilton leaves on a good note and leaves the team in a better state than it was a couple of years ago, then that forward momentum and positivity and overall confidence could be the thing that Max Verstappen is looking for. A status quo. And not to mention the facilities and big bucks, which Red Bull still currently have, and things are looking alright right now, but things can realistically change, because even though Red Bull have been quick to dispel all the rumours around tensions and bickering and the drama between Jos Verstappen and Christian Horner, it's still there, and it does come out of the woodwork every couple of weeks or so. Yes, we don't know what's been going on behind closed doors to the fullest, but it is evident that Red Bull are under more pressure than they have been since 2021. And that this year will be a crucial year to prepare themselves for a very tight battle for 2025. And teams are trying to go down in this current regulation cycle swinging. So naturally, there are going to be drivers up and down the grid trying to secure places at other teams or staking the claim at the team that they're currently at. Tsunoda now being punchy, Lawson being punchy, Mercedes now showing their hand and turning out to be really, really competent and improving rapidly, Lewis Hamilton now having a really sweet finale at Silverstone with Mercedes. It's looking all rosy for Mercedes at the moment. No one saw that coming at the beginning of the year after 2 years of dirgeness. Which is why I think we need to take a step back and look to what happened at the previous big regulation cycle in 2014 with Sebastian Vettel at Red Bull. When it was obvious the team dynamic was shifting away from what he had expected, coupled with a car that was simply not competitive or reliable, and Daniel Ricciardo proving to be more of a handful than he expected, Vettel moved to a team which could give him more and had a spot open for him, which in that case was Ferrari. The same thing at Red Bull could happen next year or the year after. Now, of course, currently, Perez is not going to be troubling Verstappen anytime soon, and even a revitalized Ricciardo in his mid-30s might not be able to do the job. But if Christian Horner is forced to have his arm twisted to get the services of Yuki Tsunoda alongside Verstappen, and Tsunoda is that willing to go after Verstappen and really make his life difficult, or at least much more difficult than Checo has, then that could easily cause Verstappen to go, you know what, I can't be bothered with this. The car is not delivering what I want or expected, or the team dynamic that I've cultivated is just falling away, and I just will not tolerate this. It's a really tricky phase in Red Bull's time in F1 at the moment, because they're trying to figure out what they're trying to be as an entity with two teams. Are they trying to be a team which is populating F1 with really talented drivers and young talent for themselves to be able to capitalize on first hand and first dibs? Or are they just trying to be an entity which makes big bucks for their investors and shareholders, and ultimately just trying to be as dominant as possible with any driver they can get their hands on? Red Bull Junior drivers be damned. Two drivers in Sergio Perez and Daniel Ricciardo are really not showing their hand to the best of their ability. And now it's causing Tsunoda and Lawson, two of their young talents, to start getting punchy in public and asserting their claims after years of waiting. It's a really, really interesting dilemma. Either Red Bull gives Tsunoda and Lawson a chance and potentially disrupts the likes of Ricciardo and Verstappen, and then things move to a way that they don't like, or they can just keep things as they are because it's safe and it keeps Verstappen happy and his team. And then that leads to potentially Tsunoda looking elsewhere, Lawson looking elsewhere, and themselves being denied two potential drivers of the future should those drivers that they currently have retire or move to other teams themselves or leave the sport entirely. And then it means in terms of the Red Bull succession plan, there's a little bit of a gap. Hadjar would be their biggest bet, and Hadjar at Red Bull right now? No. Arvid Lindblad in F3, would they skip him forward to F1 Earlier than planned? No! Of course, this could prove to be just a brief wobble and the team reboots quickly, and perhaps enters the new era F1 even more dominant than before, and if that's the case and the data in the simulator is to Max's liking, he'll stay where he is until his contract runs out in 2028. But put simply, Max Verstappen wants the best car that F1 can provide him, and if Red Bull can do that, great, nothing will change. But if Mercedes continues to kick on and ultimately has the most dominant car, and looks like that trend will continue into 2026, then Max will look for other options. And because there are so many clauses to his favour, then he can make that call without any real major repercussions, and Red Bull need to be aware of that. And they also need to be aware about how they handle their other drivers, because if you've got youngsters who want to test their mettle against Max Verstappen, then that could go either well in being determined and fired up and driving to the best of their ability, or it could lead them to make silly errors and angering Verstappen into leaving anyway. But nevertheless, I still think it would be foolish for Verstappen to completely ignore what the competition is doing. He needs to not be in a Red Bull bubble. And he really needs to pay attention to what Mercedes do and how Total handles the W16 and the rest of the W15 development if it continues to be on the up and up and up, even without Lewis Hamilton there for his own guidance. But then that being said, if the team does go ahead with Carlos Sainz and they do want Verstappen, I think that might probably mean that Toto doesn't pick the Spaniard, because if that Spaniard's there, George isn't, Verstappen comes in, so it's Verstappen Sainz there. Yeah, that's going to be probably a deal breaker with the Dutchman. You might be thinking, well, surely that'd be the best lineup you could possibly get at the moment. Red Bull should really be making the most of that since Carlos is a free agent. Well, you got to remember, the first time around when that happened, it did cause a lot of tension at the Toro Rosso camp, most notably from their fathers. So yeah, a Verstappen-Toto collaboration with Carlos there, that could be thrown into jeopardy, which would excite us fans though. And to find out why I think a Sainz-Verstappen combination would not work practically, but in terms of entertainment it would be amazing, go and watch this video next. I shall see you there.